She has been fighting for nearly 5 years, through grief, through courtrooms, through the silence of people who were there and chose not to talk. And now, with news breaking that YG has been arrested in connection with the investigation into her son's death, Drakeo the Ruler's mother has reacted. That reaction and everything behind it is bigger than most people have been willing to acknowledge. Because what happened that morning in Burbank was not an isolated moment. It was the latest chapter in one of the most emotionally devastating, legally complicated, and unresolved cases in hip-hop history. And the truth behind the headlines runs much deeper than the clips circulating online will ever tell you. Yo, what's good, fam? Before we get into what went down on July 23rd and what Darylene Corneal had to say about it, we need to take you back. Because if you don't understand who Drakeo the Ruler was, you can't fully feel the weight of everything that has unfolded since his death. And if you don't feel the weight, none of what his mother has been doing for the past 5 years makes any sense. Daryl Wayne Caldwell Jr. was born in Los Angeles, California, and grew up to become one of the most uniquely gifted rappers the West Coast had ever produced. He operated under the name Drakeo the Ruler, and from the moment he stepped onto the scene, it was clear he was built different. His flow was slippery, unpredictable, impossible to box in. He had this eerie calm in his delivery that made every line feel like a threat dressed up as a confession. He called his style nervous music, and fam, that description was perfect, because listening to Drakeo felt like something was always slightly off in the best possible way. He made you uneasy in a way that kept you locked in. He had a dedicated underground following that grew with every project he dropped, and the rap community from coast to coast recognized that he was onto something that nobody else was doing at that level. His rise in the LA rap scene was not without turbulence. Drakeo spent years battling the legal system, including a murder trial that stretched from 2018 into 2020, and charges that many in the hip-hop community viewed as an overcriminalization of rap lyrics used as evidence against him. He beat those charges. He came home with his freedom and a renewed hunger, dropping projects and racking up millions of streams, earning features from artists like Drake. By late 2021, Drakeo the Ruler was on the verge of something enormous. He was not just surviving, he was ascending. Part of what made Drakeo so compelling was that he operated outside the traditional boxes LA rap had been built around. He was not a gang rapper in the conventional sense. He was not chasing mainstream approval. He was building something entirely his own, a lane that was rooted in authenticity and fed by a fan base that felt like they had discovered a secret. Artists across the country were citing him as an influence. His most recent project at the time of his death, The Truth Hurts, contained a collaboration with Drake that underscored just how far his reach had extended. He was playing at Rolling Loud just 6 days before the Once Upon a Time festival. He was in the middle of the best run of his life, but here's where it gets real. Long before December 2021, there was tension. Tension rooted in geography, in street affiliations, in competitive dynamics that ran deep through the fabric of Los Angeles rap. And at the center of that tension sat a conflict between Drakeo's camp and the orbit surrounding Compton rapper YG. Real talk, YG was already one of California's biggest names, a recording artist who had crossed from the underground into mainstream success, whose roots in Compton's Bloods culture were not a secret to anyone paying attention to West Coast hip-hop. Drakeo, on the other hand, moved through LA rap as someone who refused to pledge allegiance to any side, which made him both respected and targeted. He had a song called Ingleweird that aimed squarely at people associated with Inglewood, and those bars did not go unacknowledged. The back and forth between the two camps played out in music, in interviews, in social dynamics that followers of the scene tracked closely. By the time 2021 arrived, the tension between those two worlds was something anyone involved in LA rap understood without needing it explained. The civil proceedings would later unearth testimony suggesting the friction had boiled over in more direct ways in the months leading up to December. According to sworn deposition testimony, Drakeo's personal security had to intervene at least once during a prior encounter between the two rappers outside a recording studio, where words were exchanged that made it clear neither camp felt comfortable around the other. Summer 2021 interviews and music releases from artists connected to both camps were cited in those same proceedings as further evidence of a dispute that had not cooled down. This was not background noise. This was a documented conflict with a documented history, and that history would matter enormously in the years of legal proceedings that follow. Now let me break down for y'all what happened on the night of December 18, 2021, because the details of that evening are important. The Once Upon a Time in LA festival was held at the Bank of California Stadium in Exposition Park. It was a major event, headlined by Snoop Dogg and featuring an all-star lineup that included Ice Cube, The Game, 50 Cent, and YG. Drakeo was also on the bill. It was the kind of platform that should have been a career-defining night for him. Instead, it became the night the hip-hop world lost him. Backstage, in the transport area behind the stage, a fight erupted. Accounts from the time described a large group, some wearing red, some wearing ski masks, flooding into the restricted backstage area and descending on Drakeo and his small entourage. His younger brother, rapper Ralphie the Plug, was with him. Witnesses described chaos, dozens of people swarming the space that should have had strict security controls. Drakeo was stabbed in the neck. He was rushed to a nearby hospital. The festival was shut down more than an hour early. And just days after his 28th birthday, Daryl Caldwell was pronounced dead. Law enforcement launched an investigation immediately. Surveillance footage and cell phone video were reviewed. Detectives began building a picture of what happened in that backstage area. But here's where it gets complicated, fam. Witnesses were not cooperating. Sources close to the investigation told outlets at the time that the lack of cooperation from people who were present made the process of identifying and arresting those responsible extremely difficult. The case did not produce an arrest. Months turned into years. The investigation went quiet in the public eye, but it did not stop. Now let's talk about Darylene Cornell, because she is the heartbeat of this entire story. From the moment she learned her son had been stabbed and rushed to that hospital, she has not allowed the world to move on. She went to the hospital and stood outside a window looking in at her son's body, because investigators had classified his death as a homicide and she was not allowed to touch him. She could not hug him, she could not kiss him. She looked through glass. That image, fam, that is where her fight began. And when she left that hospital, she made a promise that she would not rest until justice was served for Daryl. Cornell spoke to Rolling Stone in the days after Drakeo's death and gave the most detailed account that had been publicly shared. She said that witnesses she spoke with described the fight starting when a large group rushed Drakeo at the same time. YG appeared backstage. She said people were telling her there were 40 to 60 individuals involved. She said her youngest son tried to fight back, but turned around to find his brother bleeding from his neck. She has been vocal, consistent, and relentless. In her own words, she needs people to know. She needs this out there, and she believes that justice will come. So check it. Early on the morning of July 23, 2026, before most of Los Angeles had even woken up, law enforcement moved. Not a knock on the door, not a phone call. A full SWAT team, the California Highway Patrol, operating as part of a task force, coordinated with a Burbank Police Department SWAT team and descended on a commercial property in the 400 block of Mall Street near Magnolia and Burbank. That property was connected to YG. Officers arrived around 7 a.m. The scene was exactly what it looked like. Armed officers, badges, a secured perimeter. Video obtained by TMZ showed YG himself standing outside the location while the operation unfolded around him. He was detained on site while officers cleared and searched the building. The warrant was connected directly to the unsolved homicide investigation into the death of Drakeo the Ruler. And just like that, nearly 5 years after that backstage stabbing, YG's name was back at the center of the biggest unresolved murder case in West Coast hip-hop. He was detained, he was questioned, and then he was released. Law enforcement confirmed publicly that he was not arrested and is not considered a suspect or a person of interest in the investigation. That distinction is important, and it deserves to be stated clearly. Being detained during a search warrant execution is standard procedure. When officers secure a location and execute a warrant, anyone present is typically detained until the scene is controlled. That is not the same as being arrested. That is not the same as being charged. And law enforcement going on the record to say that YG is not a suspect or a person of interest in the Drakeo murder investigation is a significant clarification. But here's where it gets real. That clarification did not stop the story from igniting, because the name YG has been connected to this case since before Drakeo's body was cold. And when people who have been waiting for answers for nearly 5 years saw a SWAT team at a property tied to him, they felt something shift. The operation generated massive public attention instantly. YG, for his part, still showed up to a Versus battle against the game that same evening. And when he took the stage, he addressed what had happened that morning with characteristic bluntness. He told the crowd he almost did not make it to the show that day, then shook it off and performed. That moment went viral because the contrast between a police operation at dawn and a packed live performance by nightfall was exactly the kind of thing that made the case feel surreal to everyone watching. Now let me get into the legal architecture that has been building around this case, because the criminal investigation is only one part of the story. The civil lawsuit filed on behalf of Drakeo's family is just as important, and in many ways has produced more documented information about what happened that night than anything else. Shortly after Drakeo's death, the family announced plans to sue the festival organizers. The civil action named Live Nation, C3 Presents, Bobby D Presents, and other defendants, seeking at least $20 million in damages. The lawsuit was eventually filed on behalf of Drakeo's son, Caden Caldwell, who was only a toddler when his father was killed. The central argument in the lawsuit was that the festival organizers and security contractors failed at a fundamental level. They allowed a large group of individuals, some armed, some masked, to access a restricted backstage area where a performing artist was present. The family's attorneys described the attack as a targeted assassination. The video presented at a press conference showed men in red pouring into the fenced-off backstage area, while no security personnel or law enforcement were visible. The attorneys argued that if adequate security measures had been in place, if proper controls on backstage access had been enforced, Drakeo the Ruler would not have been killed that night. Someone, they argued, had to be held accountable. But here's where it gets deeper. The civil proceedings eventually produced sworn testimony that sent shockwaves through the hip-hop world. In March 2025, a deposition from Alric Cooper III, who served as part of Drakeo's personal security detail at the festival, was taken under oath. And what Cooper said in that deposition became one of the most significant and controversial pieces of testimony in this entire saga. Cooper told attorneys in sworn testimony that during the backstage brawl on December 18, 2021, he observed YG in the immediate area of the fight. According to Cooper, YG was front and center during the altercation. He testified that he saw YG produce what appeared to be a short, improvised knife and slash it toward him. Cooper testified that YG was wearing a ski mask during the attack, but that he recognized the rapper by his distinctive hazel eyes in the moments he spent trying to protect Drakeo. Cooper also testified that he heard voices during the chaos, asking questions like whether the person being attacked was in fact Drakeo, saying statements that suggested the attack was directed specifically at him. He recalled hearing blood gang expressions during the melee. He described the scene as a coordinated overwhelming of a small group by a much larger force. Real talk, that testimony is explosive, but it comes with essential context. These are allegations made during a civil deposition. A deposition is sworn testimony, and lying under oath carries serious legal consequences. But the statements made by Cooper have not been tested through criminal proceedings. They are part of an ongoing civil lawsuit. They are not findings of fact by a court. They are not the product of a criminal trial where the accused has the opportunity to cross-examine and challenge the evidence. YG has not been charged with any crime related to Drakeo's death. His representatives did not immediately respond to requests for comment on Cooper's deposition when the excerpt surfaced in court filings in 2025. What the deposition does establish beyond any question is that the civil case surrounding Drakeo's death contains deeply serious allegations that are being litigated through the legal process. And those proceedings continue. Now, let's talk about where YG stands publicly, because his position has been consistent regardless of what others have said about him. YG-born Kenan Daquan Ray Jackson has denied any involvement in Drakeo the Ruler's death from the very beginning. He acknowledged that the two men had a known conflict. He has not tried to pretend that their relationship was peaceful, but he has repeatedly stated that he had nothing to do with what happened backstage at that festival. He has said publicly that he came to the Once Upon a Time in LA show to perform, that he was there to collect his check, and that he did not know anyone had been stabbed until after the fact. In June 2026, just weeks before the SWAT operation, YG dropped a new album called The Gentleman's Club. On that project was a track called We Know the Truth, and the song was unmistakably a response to the years of speculation and allegations that had followed him since Drakeo's death. In those verses, YG pushed back directly against the rumors. He asked what motivation he would have had to disrupt his own paid performance. He pointed out that no arrest had been made, that no charges had been filed against him, and that the allegations of him ordering or participating in a killing were, in his words, simply not facts. He told anyone calling him a killer to come say it to his face. The song was raw, unfiltered, and made very clear that YG views the years of public accusation as something he intends to fight back against. His legal team has argued the same position, that a documented feud between two rappers does not constitute evidence of a homicide conspiracy. That being present at the same event where a tragedy occurred is not the same as causing it. And law enforcement has backed that position up by publicly stating that as of July 2026, YG has never been named a suspect or a person of interest in Drakeo the Ruler's murder investigation. So check it, fam. Why does this case continue to consume so much attention nearly 5 years after Drakeo's death? Part of the answer is the nature of Drakeo himself. He was a generational talent who died at 28, weeks after beating murder charges. At the exact moment his career was ready to break wide open. The hip-hop world does not let those kinds of losses go easily. Every project he released after his death has reminded a generation of listeners of what was taken. His influence on Los Angeles rap, on the way certain artists phrase their words and approach a beat, can still be felt in music being made right now. He left a void that nobody has been able to fill. But here's where it gets real spicy. The other reason this case refuses to die is that nobody has been arrested. Not one person has been charged in connection with the murder of Daryl Caldwell. The video of the attack exists. Witnesses were present. Surveillance footage was collected, and still after nearly 5 years, no criminal prosecution has been brought. That absence, that silence from the system, is what drives everything you see playing out publicly. Every deposition, every song, every law enforcement operation, every reaction from Darylene Cornell, they all exist in the shadow of that unanswered question. The SWAT operation on July 23rd means investigators are not done. Law enforcement went through the process of establishing probable cause, presenting that cause to a judge, obtaining a warrant, and assembling a SWAT team to execute it at a commercial property. That is not a casual procedure. That is the kind of operation that requires justification and planning. The fact that investigators are still actively gathering information connected to the case is, for anyone who has been following this story, a significant signal. And that signal is exactly what Darylene Cornell has been waiting on. So when July 23rd happened, when those SWAT vehicles pulled up to that Burbank property and YG's name started flooding every timeline, Cornell reacted. She made clear that this moment validated what she has been pushing toward for nearly 5 years. From her perspective, investigators seeking and obtaining a warrant connected to YG's property was not nothing. It was evidence that the civil case her attorneys built, the deposition testimony that surfaced publicly, the relentless pressure she applied through interviews and legal action, all of it kept this investigation alive. She had said from the beginning she would not rest. And when that warrant hit the news, Darylene Cornell was not surprised. She has always been watching. Her reaction was not celebration, it was recognition. Recognition that after 5 years of watching the investigation go quiet, law enforcement was still in this, still executing warrants, still showing up, still actively seeking answers. She has been clear on what she wants. Not a detention, not a search, but an actual criminal reckoning for what happened to her son. And while July 23rd was not that moment, it told her that the door to it has not closed. She said early in this fight that she needed people to know, that she needed the truth to be out there. And here's what the truth looks like from where she is standing right now. Her son was killed backstage at a major festival in Los Angeles. He was overwhelmed by a group of people who should not have had access to that space. Nobody has been criminally charged. A wrongful death lawsuit is fighting through the courts on behalf of her grandson. Deposition testimony containing explosive allegations under oath is now part of the public record. And on July 23, 2026, California Highway Patrol and Burbank SWAT executed a warrant at a property connected to the man she has long pointed to, while law enforcement simultaneously confirmed he is not a suspect or person of interest. Cornell holds all of that at once, and she keeps going. The real kicker though, fam, is what this all means for where things go from here. The civil lawsuit continues. The deposition testimony is part of the public record. Law enforcement has now executed a major search warrant connected to this case in 2026, nearly 5 years after the night in question. And still, as of this moment, no criminal charges have been filed against anyone for the murder of Drakeo the Ruler. No arrests, no trial, no verdict. That gap between everything the public knows, everything that has been testified to under oath, everything that has been caught on camera, and the absence of a criminal prosecution is what keeps this case in constant tension. It is the open wound that no civil settlement and no law enforcement operation has been able to close. Hip-hop does not mourn the same way other communities do. It grieves loudly, in songs and feuds, in social media, and the kind of conversations that get revisited every time something new surfaces. And Drakeo the Ruler, despite being gone for nearly 5 years, is still part of those conversations. His music still plays. His influence still shapes what comes out of Los Angeles. And the unresolved circumstances of his death still carry weight in the way the culture talks about accountability, about loyalty, about what happens to artists who die before the world fully gets to know them. At the end of the day, what Darylene Corneal's reaction tells us is this: a mother's pursuit of justice does not have a statute of limitations. She made a promise when she left that hospital, and every time law enforcement moves in connection with her son's case, she is there. She is there to remind anyone paying attention that Drakeo the Ruler was a real person, not just a name in a headline or a sample in someone else's song. He was her son. He was 28 years old. He had a child of his own. He had music left to make. And somebody took all of that away in a backstage area that should have been safe. Law enforcement has confirmed that YG was briefly detained, released, and is not considered a suspect or person of interest. That is the current official position, but the investigation is ongoing. The civil lawsuit is ongoing. The deposition testimony sits in court filings for anyone to read, and Darylene Corneal is ongoing. She has not stopped. She will not stop. And as long as nobody has faced criminal consequences for what happened to Daryl Caldwell Jr. on December 18, 2021, she will keep reminding the world that her son deserved better than what he got. This case is not closed, and the chapter written on July 23, 2026 was not the last one. Drakeo the Ruler remains one of hip-hop's most tragic unresolved stories. Not because the music stopped playing. His catalog has continued to find new listeners in the years since his death. His influence keeps spreading, but the man behind that music was taken from his family, from his young son, and from the culture before any of them were ready. And the fact that no one has been held criminally accountable for that is something that sits heavily with everyone who loved him and everyone who believes that what happened backstage at the Once Upon a Time in LA festival deserves a real answer. Darylene Corneal has been carrying that weight every single day, and she is not putting it down. What do y'all think about where this investigation goes from here? Do you think we will ever see criminal charges in connection with Drakeo the Ruler's murder? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you have been following this case and you want to stay up to date on every development as it happens, you already know what to do. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let's keep this conversation going.